Hey guys, Thomas Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie Primal. Now, before I can even begin my review, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out the links in the description. One will head you over to my Patreon page. Donations are desperately needed. All of these things will help to keep this channel from not channel death. And with that said, let us begin our look into Primal, featuring Nicolas Cage as Frank. We begin this movie in Brazil, and we see that Nick is, or sorry, I'll just call him as his character's name, Frank, is this confident, smoke, real estate interested guy who's hunting for a jag. He comes across it and he hunts it down successfully. As he makes his way back to the docks on the boat, he is met with a large arrangement of FBI agents and a grand crew of men whom are bringing in a high needed criminal. And Frank, as the owner, or I guess one of the crew members of this boat, is wondering why they are letting this guy on this boat, etc., etc. The bad guy appears to be Richard, or just, yeah, Richard, I'll just call him that. And Frank seems to just talk to him like as if he knew him from before. And there seems to be other indications in this movie that seem to indicate that they share a past question mark. The dialogue is a bit weird in that regard, in that I never felt like it fully explicitly said like they knew each other from before. It kind of just feels like that. I could have missed something there, but that could be on me as well. The other thing I will say about this movie, and actually the next movie I will be reviewing, which also features Nicolas Cage, is that I do feel like, I'm going to say, his age is showing a bit here in this next movie as well. His acting seems to be a bit more stilted here as well as, again, in the other movie I'll be reviewing. I don't know, I think Nicolas Cage has reached his prime at this moment here before, and now he's just sort of going along for the reins, or the ride, here. From other performances I've seen, he usually tends to bring out a bit of bizarreness that is, has been memed before. And I can't really say there's anything that particularly stands out in that regard, so I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just wanting to point that out. Anyway, so he gets aboard the boat with Richard in tow, and the people that are carrying him explain that the only way that they could carry him is via boat. He has some sort of sickness, as they explain, and the only way they could apparently carry him is on boat, even though they were carrying him from a vehicle before, which was a car, so I'm not sure why they wouldn't. I'm not sure where they were trying to take him. The movie takes place in Puerto Rico, or on the sea end of Puerto Rico. I'm not sure, again, where they were trying to travel. I know they mentioned it, I just didn't catch the actual location, so I do want to point that out. Anyways, Frank is more interested in taking care of his animals, which are also on board on this boat. So, he talks to this boy, Frank that being, about him being a hunter and what he does. After the fact, he kind of hangs with his little crew, talks about how he hates his dad, and bumps into this doctor, the one in charge of Richard and, with the whole condition thing I mentioned. So Anyways, we have the soldiers giving some commands to the ship crew, or at least the leader of the ship crew. Meanwhile, Richard is having a seizure, and it's all a gimmick, I suppose. But he really sells it well enough so that the men rush in there, and then the doctor rushes in after the fact of him managing to grab 2 guns and then shooting 2 of them, or at least one of the guns, and shooting out 2 of them while after being tied up and all of that. So they follow a trail, see another dead body, and the team meets up, the army team. And they store all of the people in one side of the boat, area that they can secure. While Frank wants, of course, is more predicated to wanting to take care of his animals. Meanwhile, the cook rushes on ahead with some guy and then locks himself in the food room. After the fact, Frank is let out after they find out that the monkeys have escaped due to Richard. So this allows Frank, when he sees an opportunity, to backtrack and leave on his own. He bumps right into Richard, and then they sort of talk as if they know each other. And Rich hears the plans of the people over the radio. They said to switch. They had to switch back because of the crew back at the ship crew, not the army crew, forgot to change the radio sequence so that they couldn't, because Richard also had a radio with him as well, so he's able to keep tabs on them, at least for the first portion of the movie. So he's able to down another man, that being Richard, obviously. And Frank warns the crew that 2 of his snakes have also got out. So he begins to trank up, and as he does, he sees the jaguar that he caught at the beginning of the movie. Meanwhile, some of the crew are like checking around, making 2 of them are like making their way to like the front of the ship so they can continue to actually sail the ship. Meanwhile, Richard comes up to one of the boatmen, and this causes a immediate red flag of the movie, is that he goes up, Richard the killer goes up to one of the crew members of the boat, and he's able to fake his way into a bunch of information without this guy even being a teeny bit suspicious. It's like, why wouldn't the army crew just tell what this Richard guy looked like? Wouldn't that be information you would want to, I don't know, make sure everyone knew just in case something like this happened? Like, I don't know, that just seems like pretty basic information if you ask me. Like, tell your people what's going on. It just seems stupid that they wouldn't know that that's the killer guy. Anyways, so the boat captain gets bit by a snake, one of the venomous snakes, by the way, and the army guy leader shoots the snake. Meanwhile, we see the jaguar attack one of the army men and kill him. And Frank is continuing on the pressure on hunting that down. Meanwhile, the other crew, the ship crew, bring back the captain of that crew. So the army crew are like, now we're gonna kill Richard because he's gone too far. It's gotten personal, etc., etc. And he also wants to kill. They also want to kill the jaguar, and obviously Frank still doesn't want any of that. So he goes with the doc to help with her instead of doing what he wants to do. And he manages to make some time on his own after the fact to take down the monkeys that he finds. Meanwhile, Richard is able to take down more of the crew members, including the ones in the front section, the ones that are steering, and take them out from a misty outside outlook. So he has like superior aim, I guess. So he changes the course of the ship to turn it around and leaves. Meanwhile, Frank is like returning the monkeys and finds Richard again. And at this point, Frank has a perfect opportunity to stop Richard once and for all. He has a gun pointed at him, and this guy was told that, the army guys are like, oh, we should kill him, but nope. Frank decides we're not gonna kill him yet, because Ralph comes in, Ralph being the kid of the captain, the one who Frank was teaching how to hunt. The Jaguar also comes in, so now there are four, the three people in the room, plus the Jaguar. So Frank darts Richard and shoots bullets at the Jaguar, which, I don't know, it seems a little bit backwards from what he would have normally had wanted to do at the beginning of the movie, but I guess he decided to change his mind. Anywho, Frank returns to the army guys, and he's like, ugh. And the army guys, while he's talking to them, they take out one of the escape boats so that they could hunt Richard down. He's gone too far. They're going to take him out for good. Meanwhile, Frank is with Doc and Ralph, the boy. And after that, he goes back to like looking around, making sure after they were safe. But before he can get to whatever he was looking for, Richard finds him again, and they fight. And Richard just like knocks him out, I think. Anyway, one of the soldiers is getting ready to kill Richard, and one of the teammates, this Walsh guy, Walsh being a guy who wanted Richard alive, kills the soldier in the back and then lets Richard escape, so figure that one out. I think they were trying to make a parallel to Frank and how, like, how pursued he is to keep the Jaguar alive, I guess. But the character didn't really stand out that much before. To be honest, I don't even think his name was Welsh. I think that was Frank's last name, and I kind of got it mixed up. Like, that's how forgettable that character was, honestly. Anywho, so Richard has Frank all tied up and is, like, torturing him for information, because Frank managed, I forget where this happened, but I think it was in their second interaction, managed to steal his information about, like, where he was, like, trying to go or whatever. So Richard kills the animals to get the information, and he tells them, Frank does. Meanwhile, the boat crew decide that they're going to stop the ship fully, so they do that. Excuse me. So Richard gets attacked. Richard attacks two more of the two boat crew that had stopped the ship. He takes one of them out at least. Meanwhile, that Welsh guy, whatever his name actually is, lets Frank go. And Frank gets back to the dock. And he manages to find another lifeboat, like this little, like, carry custom-made lifeboat thing. I don't know what you would call it. Pop-out lifeboat, I guess? I don't know. Anyway, they carry out the lifeboat thing out to the top, and they throw it down, and it pops up. But Richard somehow knows their location. He, like, manages to also get up there while they're all up there, because Frank went up there with all the others, like the Doc, Ralph, some Welsh, a few other people. So Frank heads out as the distraction. They gun him out in order to try to get the boy. They manage to fail to do that, but they shut the other lifeboat down in the process. So now they really can't get out that way. Meanwhile, Frank gets ready to hunt once more, and the Doc comes out with him as they are on the in this room, and then they get out after talking. So Frank wants to use the Doc as bait, so she proceeds to say, "Sure, whatever, that's fine." Meanwhile, Richard calls the Coast Guard, and he has 1 hour until a chopper arrives. He's able to also trick the Coast Guard, I guess, into thinking he's just some army guy. Figure that one out. I don't know. Anyways, the Doc proceeds to make some noise. Richard heads to that location. The Doc gets jump scared by a monkey, then is taken by Richard. Meanwhile, Frank comes at him from the other side with a bow and arrow. And guess who also manages to find them once again? You bet it. It's Welsh. Coming out with a gun, holding it back to Frank. So Frank pulls, letting the Doc free on the arrow. In the process, he is shot in the shoulder. Excuse me. So he manages to have the Doc help him out. Richard kills Welsh in the process, he shot at him instead. As Frank kind of escaped. Meanwhile, Frank sees the Jaguar once again and manages to cage him in another area. So Frank makes Rich come to him, with Rich having both the Doc and Ralph in this area, this little vent area with tied up. He lets one of the snakes out and proceeds to hunt down for Frank instead of having Frank come to him. So in this little fight, Frank proceeds to trank Richard twice, and then proceeds to try to fight him out until the tranquilizers take effect. They go knife to knife, and after a while, then the tranks take their effect, which gives Frank the ability to hide behind a scoop trap that I forget when he actually sets this up, but he manages to lift up Richard and then have the Jaguar go and attack him. And he returns one of the lines that Richard said, something about it being personal or whatever. The Jaguar attacks, etc., etc. Frank gets to the other two in time, the Doc and Ralph, before the snake bites either of them. And then the helicopter arrives to save not only Ralph, but his dad, the one who got bit, the ship owner. Meanwhile, one of the other crew members is working to get the ship back in order. Other than that, the Doc saves Frank from police scrutiny because the animals he had were illegal or whatever. But the Doc says that the processes were burned or something to that effect, and then he calls in this little bird that he had at the beginning that he said wasn't his bird, but totally is his bird, and that was Primal. There are a few very conveniences in this movie. Obviously, people being in the correct positioning for certain events to occur. Animals being that additional threat so that it's not just crazy guy on boat. And as I said, Nicolas's Cage performance, it does seem a little bit more stilted here. He's playing the very old man now. He's old and tired. He's taking on that persona now. I will also argue that he does that in the next movie, again, that I will be reviewing right after this. So yeah, there's all of that to consider. There's some action here and there, and again, there are plenty of conveniences. I felt like they could have did a little bit more with the characters here as well. The build between him in particular and the Doc just was a little bit flat, I guess I'll call it. So I'd give this movie a 5 out of 10. I think the action's decent enough, and I feel like some of the stuff was kind of building up decently enough, but again, there are other conveniences that sort of just happen to allow other events to happen just so that they can happen. Anyways, that is my review, and once again, if you did enjoy it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my Discord server, the other my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated. Until next time, everyone, bye-bye.